take it away.
Awesome, excellent. Thank you so much, Bryce. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity, or giving me the opportunity to present. Before I continue, Bryce, can you just confirm that you can hear me well and that the audio and the video is working fine?
Looks good, sounds good.
All right, thank you so much. Awesome, excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bart Lenaerts, part of the Venafi team based in Salt Lake City. I'm unfortunately not in Salt Lake City, but based on the East Coast here. And the next 20-25 minutes, I'm going to talk about SSH. Fantastic protocol, fantastic opportunity. I use it a lot. One of my hobbies is maintaining a website, a couple of websites, and SSH and SSH keys are essential cornerstones or building blocks for doing that work. But it has risks, and in my case, there's only like 1 or 2 people that are working on the website, but when you get into a lot of people, it can become an issue and it become a liability. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about it. Yes, it's a great tool, but watch out because there are some issues. And how can you prepare? What should you do actually around SSH and SSH keys? Cool. Here are the topics I'm going to talk about. First of all, for those who may not be up to speed, we'll talk a little bit about what is SSH, secure shell, and what are SSH machine identities. I'm going to talk about some common risks that we're seeing, some common mistakes. I will talk briefly on a best practice called NIST IR 7966 as a foundation. Then also I want to share a couple of dashboards that I've seen people implementing when working with SSH keys. And I want to share them and see exactly how a practice could look like and how these reports could look like. And then we'll wrap it up at the end. Cool. So I expect this presentation 20-25 minutes, and we'll definitely leave some questions at the end. All right, let's start with this beginning. For those who are, usually I ask a question always like who is using the secure shell and who is using keys and so on and so forth. Can't do it now, so I will assume that some of people still may not know what SSH is. So a little bit of an introduction. SSH is used today by IT administrators as well as automation processes. Automation processes or services, actually, they're using this. And it can be used in many ways. You can use it for ad hoc. That's what it's mostly known for, mostly how it was started actually as an ad hoc tool for connecting to a switch, a router, or a server, or a Linux box, and doing command line tools, and then logging out again. But that became sort of boring, or I would say that became sort of, people wanted to start automating things. And so it's very easy to start scripting out SSH as well. And there are many automation tools that starting using this. CI/CD tools are starting to use this, or are using SSH actually. But also you can use SSH for data transfer. In my case, when I manage the website, I use SSH, and I use it, for instance, for uploading and downloading, or for moving files and moving pictures from one area to another area, and so on and so forth, or from between different sites that I have. And so it's no longer an individual IT admin tool. It's used by so many different things, by services, by automation tools, as well as for data transfer. Now, why was it invented? Why was SSH invented? Why is it so popular? Well, it's actually a replacement of Telnet. Telnet, that was very popular in the 90s, was the default tool to connecting to a device. But it was unencrypted. You could see username passwords very easy. And so that is one of the key things why SSH came to life and got that adoption, because when you connect a client to a host, now everything is encrypted, and the connection cannot be seen anymore. And so that's one of the main reasons why it got so popular. Now, how does this encryption work? Well, I use the term identities. The keys actually being used is when a client connects to a host, then a host key is sent to the client. And that's used as a first step to do the encryption. And there are many forms of encryption that you can start using. There are, I think, the latest version more of some of these SSH clients, they can support maybe 10 or dozen different types of encryptions. Now, you have the encryption, but there's a second thing that is also very interesting, and that is the concept of keys, SSH keys. And so there is the concept of private keys and public keys that you can deploy. Basically, if you are, once you're logged in, you can start creating keys, and you keep the private key for yourself, but you deploy the authorized or the public key on the host. And next time that you want to log on, you don't have the full authentication, you don't have to do the full authentication access validation anymore. You can just start using that key and off you go, and your connection is immediately sent up. So basically it's encryption, but especially when we talk about private keys, public keys, these are the machine identities that enable those automated connection. And that is another very, very popular usage for SSH, because again, when I'm using my websites, different websites from development that I have to production side, I just use the keys and I can go from one to another, and it's automated. And it's no longer, it doesn't require each time username, password authentication, or an access validation. That's one of the great things about SSH again. Now, if you see this, some people may say, well, it's interesting. You have this host key and those private key, public keys. But how do I manage this? What happens when you do this in scale? And so we've done a little bit of research on this. And what we found out that the operations of SSH keys is actually in the hand of IT admins as well as DevOps people. In the past, it used to be purely IT admins, but more and more developers are starting to use their own keys as well, so they can jump quickly to a box and see how a process is working or helping or working out. Or they want to, they use it actually around their tools to transfer the data. And again, if you, like in my case, there's only like 2 people working on a couple of websites, no issue. But once you start having multiple users, all deploying, creating, deploying, and required to rotate the keys, because those keys, once they are around, of course, they need to be rotated frequently, then you can see how it ends up, right? You can immediately see that you're getting quickly into sprawl of keys, actually. We did some research on this. I found out some research from Palo Alto Networks. There's also some research from other companies. But this was a survey that we did, and you can look it up. And we found out that in 61% of organizations, the users themselves, the IT admins or the developers, were configuring, were actually allowed to configure their own authorized keys. So, and actually the administration of those keys was also left over to those users, IT admins of DevOps people. No issue with that. The issue is although more on the InfoSec side, where, or even actually on the admin sides, where very few people now have a complete and accurate overview of all the SSH key inventory. So keys are being created, people leave the organization, their keys are still around. Maybe they're sharing keys, maybe they're duplicating the same key. And of course, this can lead to specific issues. Another thing that we see is, yes, SSH is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly powerful and incredibly popular. And Palo Alto Networks actually in their, the Unit 42 from Palo Alto Day, indicated that 76% of the cloud workloads today expose SSH in one or other form. So think about this when you're just creating keys and deploying them and you're doing it not effective, or you're not storing the private key effective. If some of those keys can get into the wrong hands, a lot of things can go wrong. Anyway, the point I wanted to make is this: how is SSH keys administered today? And it's usually left up to the individuals. Now, what does it mean? What are sort of those risks and mistakes that can happen? Well, let's talk a little bit about those. So on the IT side, the admin side, the DevOps side, the developer side, these are some of the common mistakes. The first of all is toxic growth in trusted connection. When I watch myself and I see how often I create a new key, or I just ignore the previous one, it's amazing. And you end up, and then I have two laptops. It's another thing. I have two laptops. It's amazing how many keys I have. And just because you can quickly create them, you create them. Do I each time remove them? Likely not, right? So you end up quickly in a very toxic growth sprawl of keys. And we've done surveys and we've done assessments, and we found out that in some cases, actually, the host to key ratio was 1:100. So it's, if you have one host, then quickly you can find around 100 keys around this. Very important also when you think about SSH keys, it's not like a certificate. It does not expire. In other words, that key that is installed could be there forever. The other thing that we're seeing, and everyone will agree with me with this, is excessive privileges. I'm likely one of the one who violates the principle of least privilege access a lot. I like always to have somewhere a way to get in. And we're seeing that again, is that people are often deploying root keys, and not just root keys and removing them, they're leaving them permanent on. And we're even seeing that some of those keys are being used by employees, but not only employees, but also they've been shared with employees and contractors who may walk out with them. So another thing that we're seeing. And then the third thing that we're seeing is weak keys, sharing keys between admins, putting them on a USB drive, moving them from one client to another client. Copying the same identical keys to assets, and it can be both the private public key, can be one of those, but also the host key. We're seeing, for instance, in some automation or even some deployment pipelines, that a service provider was continuously deploying the same virtual machine with the same SSH host key on it, which again, if someone gets access to this, could now start decrypting a lot of the traffic. Anyway, this is happening on one side, right? So toxic growth, excessive privileges, and weak key. Now, I come from a security operations background, and here are the other things that we're seeing, especially on the InfoSec side. So first of all, there's a lack of keys. No one has the time for doing this. I mean, everyone knows that the SSH keys are in use, but very few people have access to and knowing where those keys are. And I mean, it becomes a nightmare to start installing this or to start monitoring this, if you really think about this, or what a lot of people think about. The second thing is intelligence, right? Is that most InfoSec security operators have no clue of which keys expose some risks. For instance, are they being shared? How old are they? Have they become weak actually? And then the last thing is that if something would happen, right, then a lot of the InfoSec team, a lot of the security operations team would not have a capability to rotate those. What they usually have, they can say, oh, yes, I can go in and I can start removing the keys. Yes, but what you also are doing is now disabling some of the connections. And you could bring your company, IT services and IT environment actually to a halt, to a stop. So I just want to show the two worlds. One, the worlds of the developers and the IT admins, the other side, the world of the InfoSec team. Another thing that we're seeing is that a lot of people say, yes, but wait a minute, it's okay. SSH is encrypted. No one will know about this. Well, actually, no. That is absolutely the wrong attitude. The wrong attitude is thinking that if it's encrypted, it must be okay. No, you're playing with fire, because those keys, when they become weak, they can be stolen by an adversary or by an insider threat. They can then open the door to a backdoor or give unauthorized access. And not only that, if you have multiple of those keys, people could start pivoting around with those keys from one host to another host. And by the way, SSH allows port mirroring, so they could extract data, they could do SCP, they could do SFTP, things like this, extract the data, and you don't have a capability to respond to all of this. So this is what also is known often as the sleeping dragon, and some organizations talk it like that. It's a sleeping dragon, it's not managed, and it can have big consequences. And that has happened actually. So here's a couple of examples. This is from the last, I would say 8 months. There have been vendors who have issued critical warnings about their data center switches because what they ship the same default SSH key peer everywhere, right? Then, of course, there were specific malware campaign, the Go malware. That's a malware that actually was doing nothing else as trying to use those keys, those common keys that were known, that were found on some of those devices, to go in and get access. And then a very big one, actually still going on, is the TrickBot malware. A malware really that's hard to detect, and has the objective really to steal credential as well as SSH private keys from PuTTY. And the goal again is to steal it out, to take access, to get those keys, and then use it as a backdoor later in, or sell it online via the dark web for people to go and execute the full attack. There's others like SkidMap. SkidMap, it's very nice. So the difference between Go malware, TrickBot, and SkidMap is so simple. Go malware is just phishing actually, or using keys that are known, like from vulnerabilities. TrickBot is trying to steal it, and SkidMap is doing the opposite. SkidMap is doing nothing else as installing keys, knowing that InfoSec teams don't have a inventory, and saying, oh, I will just install new keys. Now I enable a backdoor, and because no one is monitoring this, this may go on, and I have a full-time backdoor that can start using this. So these are real threats. And again, like I mentioned, TrickBots was one of the most popular or prevalent, I would say, malware in 2019. Another comment that I want to make around this, and I will speed it up a little bit, is that when you think about SSH, it's not just about InfoSec. Also, auditors are hearing about this. So auditors get influenced by peer reviews. They're hearing about those risks. They're hearing about the path of least resistance. And the internal audits now hear also about this, and they want to validate the attestation of controls. And so a lot of people are failing their SSH audit today. Now, is everything lost? No, you can prepare. And I will give you some very specific guidelines on how you can prepare. The first one is think about a best practices framework. You don't have to create your own policies. If you go to NIST IR 7966, you can find in the appendix, I think about 40 different controls that are all NIST 853 based, and you can select them and you can view them. And so it's very comprehensive. Comprehensive paper actually from NIST on how you can manage actually SSH and what you should do about this. We'll talk about it in a moment as well. The second thing that you can do is try to assess. There are multiple ways how you can, there are multiple tools that you can use to discover your environment, right? And see, well, how many keys are there? Things like that. Also, that brings usually up some very interesting insights, and then use that as a method to start governing the life cycle, saying, look guys, something is wrong, we have way too many keys, we're at risk, things like that. Now we need to start implementing a life cycle, specifically about communicating out those controls, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. Also try to put in a process where you can request them and hand actually keys out or deploy them for them automatically. Another very interesting thing, that's the third step that you can do, is around creating an inventory. So discover But build an inventory. Build an inventory about who is talking to who, which keys are being used, and maybe the purpose where they're using for. Is it just an interactive protocol? And get insights on which are active and which are non-active. And those that are old and haven't been used for maybe over a year, or erase them, throw them out. It will really limit immediately your risk and reduce your risk substantially. The fourth thing you can do is, of course, policies, right? Use those policies, apply them against your inventory. You see now exactly like which keys are old, needs to be rotated, which keys have been duplicated, where is risk, which are the root keys, make sure you rotate them a little bit faster, things like that. So do that. And the last one is, when you mitigate, try to do it in an automated way. Manually is very, very time consuming. Try to do it in an automated way. There are maybe some public domain or open source scripts, but you also can start using tools for this. And so that's the next thing that I want to talk about. So again, I don't want to enforce a tool here, but what I want to say is start with the framework, right? Start with that framework, that NIST IR 7966, and then work up to a way that you can mitigate this. Now, if you are looking for a tool, if you want a tool, here's a good checklist that you could use. And NIST IR 7966 has a very, very comprehensive checklist of things that you should look for. There are multiple tools in the industry. You can there's open source tools, there are commercial tools, things like that. But this is the NIST IR 7966 is that appendix, give an overview of what you should do. You need to make sure that you can discover, that you can build an inventory, that you can analyze, that you can provision, that you can rotate those out, that you have a portal through which people can request it, or that you can, through the request, immediately can implement it. Monitor continuously which one are active, which one are non-active, entitlements, and also integrate it also with your security operations workflow. Things like alerting, also audit it frequently. I'm not going to go into details. I'm just saying that we're a little bit limited on time for that. But it's an excellent tool, an excellent publication around how to make tool selection. What it actually is saying is there are three big groups. There's like a group that talks about visibility, a group that talks about building out intelligence, and a group that talks about how to automate it. So to simplify, they think about when you want the tool that gives the visibility, intelligence, and automation. All right, this is a quick use case. I will quickly go over it, but it's a use case where, of course, at Venafi, we have a tool, but we had a customer, a major US airline, and they had 1.4 million keys in use. It's quite a lot, and they failed in all, and they had to have big security actually. So they had that sleeping dragon was found by an auditor. And IT said, "There's no way I can remediate this. This is going to take a lot of time and effort." And so what they did is they discovered it. They start eliminating unused keys. They start splitting and rotating, and then they start building an auto provisioning process. And so the end state after this is they reduced the number of keys initially. It grew back, but in a much controlled way. But now they have a continuously view of all the keys, the accounts, the systems, and so on and so forth. All right, I have a couple of minutes left. I will go a little bit faster, but I want to show you a couple of dashboards that could be very, very instrumental. So the first dashboard is around knowing your assets and your key usage. So I'm showing a couple of dashboards here, like knowing how many hosts you have, how many keys there are, how many unused keys there are. Trust distribution, this is basically the number of connections per client. So when you see like more than 20 trust, it means that actually it's per host, is how many clients can be connected or have deployed keys to a specific host. Key size information, do you still have all key sizes, 512? And also very important, what is the trend? Is the SSH key usage going up? Is it strongly going up? How much is it going up? Is it even? Am I working on this? Yes, no. When you see a strong spike, watch out. It may be that one of your automation tools is going nuts. Right. Another good tool, and this is really very important, is about risk surfacing risks. And so capability to say, here are specific NIST control numbers, filter out now the keys that may violate to those specific controls. And so finding out root orphans, basically the root keys there, the public keys there, but the private key is completely unknown. No one knows where it is, right? That seems to be like a high risk to me. Private shared keys, when the USB drive goes around with all the keys, try to find those, right? Another sample report is around rotation and mitigation, like how many are you rotating on a weekly basis and what's coming up. Try also to find those that have failed. Maybe the communication is not working fine, things like that. And then another set of report is around the life cycle, like how many keys have been requested, deployed, are they waiting for approval, are they assigned to me, to others, and of course managing that is very important, because admins, IT admins hate waiting for an approval. So make it as easy and as simple where they have request a key, or it gets immediately automated and delivered to them, but they can start using this immediately and don't have to wait for any approval. All right, I'm going fast, but this is the last slide here. SSH keys and the automated connections they enable are an essential building block. But there is a risk. There's a risk that I was talking about earlier. You don't have to stand and build your own controls for this. There is the NIST IR 7966 that lists, it's very, very detailed. And yes, there are tools. And when you want a tool, think about visibility, building out visibility in those keys, think about building out intelligence about this, and then automating this. And of course, the benefit for this is, first of all, yes, you're going to avoid those expensive audit failures or last minute requests when someone is knocking at your door, I need all the keys. So you're going to avoid those. That can be very, very expensive. You also can benchmark your policies and your practice against industry best practices. And you can set your own quality label, actually. And last but not least is what you're doing is you're protecting your most critical assets. All right. This was my last slide. If you have any questions, this is my email address, bart.lenaerts@venify.com. We have a web page as well, but if there are any questions, I will try to watch now. I'm going to stop sharing, and I can see if there are any questions for this specific topic.